Hey Riana, thank you for joining in with me today. Appreciate you being here.
Hi, Harrison. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, anytime. So, one of the things that I think I found most appealing is you're in something that nobody else has done before. So, I guess before we get into the depth of it, give people a broad brushstroke of what you do and who you work with and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, I was a psychotherapist for 20 years in private practice and decided to do the coaching model. I got trained in 2009 and 10 with RCI, Relationship Coaching Institute. And through working with many people of trauma over the years and having my own traumatic relationship occur, I did some research on what my partner might have had that made us sabotage, which was really an amazing love relationship. And I knew he was what's called ACOA, adult child of an alcoholic. Unfortunately, had a horribly alcoholic father. And there were other traumas. So looking at his traumas and the traumas of the people that I worked with, I put together the childhood trauma checklist and started making correlations between childhood trauma and difficulties in love relationships, career, life in general, having high anxiety, bouts of depression. And I said, this is so fascinating, this topic, that I want to specialize in this. And
Sure.
then a couple of years later, I came across the ACE study, ACE, which
Hmm.
stands for Adverse Childhood Events, done by Kaiser Permanente Group out of San Diego with the CDC, Center for Disease Control. And they did a large study with over 17,000 people on how childhood trauma impacts adults later in life with early illnesses and disease, like
Okay.
heart disease, diabetes, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. So their research was really awesome in solidifying what I saw, but I just took the other areas, which was life and love and how
Hmm.
it impacts people there versus the disease component.
Sure.
So it was very timely that our work about the same time and came out about the same time.
Very cool. And what was like the key factor in you saying, "Hey, this is what I want to do and this is what I want to help people with?" Because this is pretty unique, I would say in most cases.
Yeah, it's very unique. It's finally getting out there. I love that Oprah Winfrey was the host on 60 Minutes doing a study on childhood trauma. And she goes, I have never heard of this. If I would have heard of this years ago, it would have made a lot of sense for my life because she did grow up with a lot of childhood trauma
Sure.
herself. So that is, started to bring everything out in the open as well as the ACE study. Interestingly enough, the ACE study's checklist of childhood trauma was different than mine.
Hmm.
And through the years, CDC added more components to their list that mine had in my original list. I thought that was interesting. But it was my own love trauma that led me to the research and finding the answers of, again, my partner saying and doing things that sabotaged our love relationship. And I had to make sense of that.
Sure.
So that led to my healing, and then it led to my using my work, my studies helped my own therapy clients, and
Sure.
that's what led to me wanting to specialize in it because it was really transforming a lot of lives once I had the information that I needed. It not only worked for me, it worked for my clients as well.
Sure. So, I'm very curious. When a client works with you, what are they typically getting? Like, how does that whole process work? And do you consider it recovery? Do you consider it care? Do you consider it a lifestyle change? Like, what do you consider it, and what do you think what do you think they
Yeah,
think it is?
it's definitely lifestyle change. I don't call it recovery because recovery is more a term with addiction studies, addiction work. I am an LCADC2 licensed certified drug and alcohol addictions counselor. So that, you hear recovery and addictions, and I wouldn't call this addictions. I would call this, it's definitely unconscious behavioral patterns that become normalized due to the fact that people use them in childhood for
Hmm.
coping strategies, to survive, to get along with their mom and dad, a difficult father who's yelling and screaming, or, a cold, critical mother. You have to find ways as a child with your little innocent mind how to get by,
Sure.
and exist within your family. So it is a lifestyle change. I also teach the mindset for success.
Hmm.
So my courses are 50% life coaching and 50% love coaching. And the combination, along with the mindset for success, we look at all life areas. So not only, relationships, but family relationships, love relationships. If they're single, dating, having more success in dating, choosing an emotionally healthy, evolved, and conscious partner, not someone that's toxic, that's going to cause you heartache.
Yeah.
Getting along better with your children. So that's parenting skills. Maybe going for that career you always loved, but you always held back and stayed in a job that you don't like because you were
Mhm.
afraid to take risk. So all these fears and this negative mindset is wrapped around unhealed traumas.
Gotcha. So, I guess let's just jump to one end of the extreme spectrum here. Is like what is the worst thing that you've had to deal with as far as a client goes, if you're even allowed to say it?
Well, I would never say a name, but I would say all my clients usually come to me with very high anxiety, low trust, bouts of depression, many people being in a long-term marriage, 23 to 30 years, with a lot of emotional abuse, some physical abuse. um, Definitely one partner is very toxic and abusing the other. That's normally what happens. So I do work with singles that might have love addiction, know the partner is unhealthy, but can't seem to leave them. They seem stuck, or they leave and they keep going back. The studies show people in these types of toxic relationships go back 7 times before they're finally done.
Really?
They're always hoping for the best to recreate the beginning of the sparks of fire that these relationships usually have.
Sure.
In the beginning, they're very passionate and sensual, and a lot of high attention and love and gifts. So they're always trying to recreate that beginning. And usually 4 to 9 months in, or once the relationship becomes either exclusive, moving in together, engaged, marriage, or a child comes, these transitions usually escalate the behavioral patterns and can make these relationships toxic.
Gotcha. So when somebody keeps going back, that average of 7 times, how do you help them break that cycle?
Disengage. Well, that is a form of addiction. It's called
Mhm.
love addiction.
Sure.
And that's usually
I'm
someone
sure that
that,
most of
from
us
a
are guilty.
No, not most. Really, there's 10 traumas I talk about. If you'd like me to go into them, that
Please.
will make sense as we come up with, the whys this is happening. That
Mhm.
does come from trauma number 6, which is abandonment, but there's 2 types of abandonment. So I'll go into that. So, for your listeners, I'll go into the top most common childhood traumas. There are more of them, but
Mhm.
these are the ones I see most people. And studies show 90% of people have at least 1 to 3 items on this list.
Mhm.
So, if you're curious, if you're one of the 9%, 90%, we kind of have a little joke. The other 10% are sociopathic and will never admit anything's wrong with them. So it's
Sure.
like, okay, so there's probably 1 to 3 that you might find that qualify you. But as you make this list, there's 3 columns. The first column would be me, if you fall
Mhm.
into that situation. The second one, you put a partner, someone you might have struggled with in your past. And the third column, you put parents. Because studies show that this goes through at least 3 generations, if not more. So you could say mom, dad, or both as I go through the list. So remember, as I go through the list, also, this is not about shame or blame. We're not looking to blame anyone for what had happened when you were a child, because again, if you had trauma, they had trauma and they're doing the best that they knew how. And it's not about feeling ashamed that you might have gone through these things, because
Mhm.
again, this childhood trauma happened to you or within your household. There was nothing you could really do about it. So we're
Sure.
trying to look at it as a factual list, okay? So when you were young and innocent, did any of these things happen? One, the first, if your mom or dad had any addiction. Now, the Kaiser studies came out if your mom or dad used drugs or alcohol. Well, me being in addictions counseling and working in adolescent rehabs and women from the prison system that were addicted, there's many more than 2 addictions.
Sure.
So I name 11: drugs, alcohol, sex, and you knew you had a cheating parent, porn, gambling, hoarding, spending, eating, gaming, watching, workaholism. Now there's 11. that
I
could have
definitely
taken
got some of those. That's for sure.
that could have taken precedence in your life when you were young. Okay, second is verbal abuse. Kaiser studies mention if you see mom or dad yelling at each other in a verbal abusive way. I name others. So when I was working in a hospital setting with people who were adolescent, they came in, suicidal, eating disorders, cutting, addictions. So verbal was like never hearing, I love you, or never hearing compliments, or never hearing, you know, good job, son. I'm really proud of you. Instead, they might hear verbal put downs like, you'll never amount to anything. Why pay for college for you? You'll never use it. Just derogatory put
Sure.
downs. Or the other thing could have happened is verbally shutting down if they were mad at you in a passive way, aggressive way. So they went to you for a couple of hours or a couple of days if they were mad. So those are all forms of verbal abuse. Number 3, emotional abuse or neglect. We pretty much know what that is. Number 4 is any physical abuse, beating or hitting, sexual abuse, rape or molestation. Those could have happened inside or outside of the home. The next one is abandonment, and there's 2 types, fault and no fault abandonment. So no fault abandonment is if your parent might have died early. Another one is if your parent went off to serve in war and you're always wondering as a kid, is my mom or dad okay? Are they coming home? That anxiety, okay, of that abandonment. And another no fault abandonment is if your parent traveled a lot and that was their job to take care of the family. And that was one of mine. And my dad, we didn't know it, but he was FBI and CIA. So my dad was like James Bond.
Mm.
But I do remember as a little child saying, when's dad coming home? And my mom would never have an answer. She didn't know.
Sure.
So that was a lot of anxiety for a kid. So a fault abandonment would be a parent that chooses never to be involved in your life. That's one. Or leaving when you were young age, divorcing, or just leaving the relationship and not seeing you much after that. Or saying they're to see you and being very inconsistent in those visits, leaving the kid always wondering, can I trust that they'll show up today or on time? And the last one might be, sure, they pick you up, but they kind of ignore you the whole weekend. They're in front of their football games and the kids in their room just on the computer, like saying, when can I go home? Because they
Sure.
don't feel any loving connection there. So those are fault abandonments. Okay.
Sure.
The next one, number 6, would be if you were part of a foster care system, if you were adopted or had to live in other people's homes to be raised, even if that's grandma or aunts or uncles or family, friends. The next one, number 7, is the most common. I call that personal trauma. So that's if you've ever been bullied or if you didn't feel like you fit in. You might have been an overweight child, skinny and gawky child, which I was as a preteen. You could have just been considered different. You might have been diagnosed ADHD at school. So you didn't always feel like the other kids, or might have had asthma, so you can be part of the sports teams or the cool kids.
Sure.
There's so many different ways you might have felt different, not good enough, or didn't fit in. Okay. Trauma number 8, we call sibling trauma. This is if your sibling bullied you, if they were born with some kind of medical condition that commanded more of mom's and dad's time to take care of them, or more commonly, you perceive them to be the golden child. For some reason, they may have been the one that were more handsome, more beautiful, more successful in the athletic teams, more intelligent in school. Just something that made them seem more special.
Sure.
Trauma number 9 is 2 parts. The first part is family trauma. That's if the family lived in a dangerous neighborhood. If you remember a lot of discussion around lack, poverty, we don't have enough money for whether it's food or things or a
Sure.
nicer home, maybe losing the home during the mortgage crises, and military families moving every 2 to 4 years.
Sure.
That puts the child as always the new kid in school. So there's many
Constantly being
types
the
of
new
family
kid.
traumas. Yes, that's difficult. And then the second part of that from the later list that I brought up, because it's really now one of the top 10s, is community trauma. And that would
Sure.
be our school shootings, our mass community shootings, our mass destruction of our communities by Mother Nature, our floods, fires, hurricanes, volcanoes. I mean, there's been so much of this lately in the past years. It's becoming overwhelming. There's always another natural disaster. So, of course, this is hard on the family and adults, but can you imagine little children living through these episodes? Very traumatic. And then the last one would be mental health issues in mom or dad. And the most too difficult to live with is bipolar and borderline. Borderline, I describe as fast trigger anger, moodiness. You never know what you're going to get. So when they're good, they're great. But when they're bad, they're really horrid.
Sure.
Very inconsistent, leaving a kid very anxious. And then bipolar is manic and depressive. So depression can come out as anger, checking out emotionally, or extreme fatigue. Manic could be like a spending spree, a gambling spree, eating binge, or it could be a happy episode as well.
Sure.
Very confusing for the children.
Yeah. Very interesting. So
Yeah.
so I would say that probably I feel like everybody, you're right. I feel like everybody would fall into one of those categories.
Did you have
So
any of those, Harrison?
oh, absolutely. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um
Yeah. So.
but so now when it comes down to those things, your as your job goes, when somebody I guess is realizing these things, they go to you. What are your next steps? Like, hey, we know that you had childhood trauma. Like, what do you do to resolve that?
Next step is really the deep dive, the analyzation. I have them talk about it. The more they really start recollection of the stories, they can then rate those incidents at 1 to 10.
Sure.
9, 10 being very severe, 1, 2 being the least severe.
Sure.
That would be an example of a kid being beat 3 times in their life and they hated it and they remember it, versus a kid being beaten 3 times a week.
Sure.
Okay, so you can see the severity levels could be very different. People that are 9s and 10s in 8 to 10 areas of trauma tend to be sociopathic. Sociopaths are people that use others for pleasure or profit to get ahead in life, with no remorse. They never apologize. Low empathy for people, taking advantage of others for their own gain.
Sure.
They usually have a lot of those traumas. And then the psychopath is a sociopath that kills, and it's usually 10 and 10s all the way around. 10
Sure.
traumas, 10 level 10s. So that's the severe end of it. And then there's the way that it shows up in life, love, career. So we can go through all 3 areas if you'd like.
Yeah, why not?
In life, you said, how are these people when they come to you? Usually, like I said, I see ongoing or high anxiety, bouts of depression, relationships that aren't working out. They want love. They want love in the worst way. And when they do, they fall in love with chemistry, biochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really scary because on dating sites, you see all kinds of men saying, must have chemistry first. And the chemistry takes you right back to your childhood, because
Sure.
the psyche wants to correct and heal what happened in the past. It's also attracted to what it knows.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why these, people of trauma attract people of trauma. And
Sure.
initially they're, like I said, they're very sexy, passionate relationships, but then it starts getting toxic about a half year or so in, when some of these things start showing up, when there's more commitment. But let's go back to some individual traits that could show up. So let's say someone who's a habitual liar. Where does that come from? So lying comes from, it's a form of manipulation, but it's if they're afraid as a child of being punished. So this might be the little boy that comes home with an F on the test and says, oh man, I got to get this signed up, make it an A and see if I can get away with it. Well, if he does, he finds out lying works, and it gets him out of the beatings. It's a survival skill. It becomes a coping mechanism. And when he does it so many times, it just becomes a normal way of being, a normal way. And they don't even consciously think, I'm lying. And this will be the person's like, why are you lying about that? That's like not even a big deal that you had to lie about that.
Sure, but they're just so used to it.
They're so used to it, it becomes normalized. So that's where lying comes from. Let's talk about control and jealousy. That usually comes from trauma number 7. Not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, not feeling pretty enough, handsome enough. You might have been called the nerd at school, and you're in a love relationship. Let's say it's a woman, and the man gives her all the reasons why he loves her, but they might be out together, and he's just going around the room, and she'll say, "Why are you staring at these girls?" Or, "Do you want to be with that girl instead of me?" So that's that jealousy that comes up. And though consciously she knows her man loves her, unconsciously she may be afraid she might lose him. And unfortunately, it usually goes too much jealousy and control. You do end up losing your partner, because if
Sure.
your partner is emotionally stable, they don't want the jealousy and controlling partner. Now, let's put it in a business situation. A lot of my typical clients is successful women in business, but they struggle in love. So, where did that come from? Maybe trauma number 7, and yet being yelled at home. So she goes, "Well, I'll be smart at school." So she would work really hard to get good grades, and found that it felt good to be successful, or the teacher's pet, right? To get the good grades. And she might hear the compliments finally from mom and dad. "Oh, you got a good report card. Great." And that was a way that she could get some love. So she learned to work hard to be successful. And another reason is to get out of the house. It's like, I'll get into a good college, I'll get out of this house, right? So they learned to become successful, but they never healed the emotional trauma that happened at home. So they're still attracted to the old dynamic of emotional love that was dysfunctional. And they end up with a partner that may be not as successful as them, but they might get a lot of love and adoration early on. And this is why a lot of business women may attract a sociopath. So this guy may charm and manipulate her to do everything that she would want in an ideal relationship.
Sure.
That's the guy that wants to marry the successful woman very quickly. This is very well depicted in a docu-series called Dirty John. And it was a true story of a female architect. Really nice woman, great mom, successful, worked hard, faith-based woman. And this charming guy swoops in and, wins her, and then wants to get married within 3 months. He was like the classic sociopath. And, he ends up trying to kill one of the daughters, and, very much isolate the mom from the kids, because the kids kind of could see early on something's wrong with this guy.
Sure.
A lot of his stories didn't add up. So this happens to more successful women than you realize. And the first signs of that is jealousy and control early on. So, those women have to be very, very, very careful. Impulsivity, that comes from someone not having a lot of things when they were young and saying, "I want this. I'm an adult. I deserve this."
Oh, that's me.
And sometimes, that's not. And sometimes this can add up into conning behavior. And this is where you see on American Greed, these stories of these businessmen and financial managers taking advantage of people. "I want the wealthy life. I want
no, I
the
just, when it
big
comes to
boats and
Amazon,
fancy cars."
Amazon one-click buy is the worst thing in the world.
Okay. Well, this is a form of impulsivity that can hurt others.
Okay.
So yeah, you want to be really careful of that. Or of course, being with a partner like that, because they could put you into a lot of debt. They could hurt you in many ways, not only hurt themselves. And impulsivity actions, is what happened with my partner. He was doing something very impulsive at his job, got fired, became a big community scandal. So not only did it ruin him, his salary, his reputation, and he ran away from town. He couldn't even face the school board. But it ruined my life,
Sure.
not only emotionally, but my business and everything else. And it was a lot of healing that I had to do, and from that love trauma. So impulsivity can really, really ruin relationships. This one is very common for women. It's called people pleasing. I'll give you an example. So if this little girl has an alcoholic mom who's very difficult to deal with, the older sister might get up and get all the kids up, ready for school, make their breakfasts or lunches, get them to the bus stop, because mom is angry and hungover and doesn't want to deal with it.
Sure.
So she will overdo to keep peace in the household and feel a little bit of love and appreciation from that mother.
Sure.
So this woman gets used to overdoing for everyone. This is very often when I have a couple come in the woman says, Riana, I'm completely exhausted, burnout. I try to do everything to please everyone. My husband, my kids, they never do anything for me. So then I usually know this is a people-pleasing situation, might have that difficult, critical mother, father there where they were trying to keep the peace. So whatever comes up in their life, their love situation, and I can hit on business a little bit, business scenarios where this could show up, they're the difficult employee that demands their own way or wants to like puff out their achievements and try and show everyone what good they're doing
Sure.
because they maybe never got compliments from mom or dad.
Mm-hmm.
So they're vying to be better and seen and known in the work spot, okay, which makes them difficult to work with.
Sure.
Or it could be someone wants to be their own entrepreneur, but is staying in that job that they hate because they're afraid to make that jump from traditional 9 to 5 to start their own career because they don't believe in themselves. They don't have enough faith or confidence that they can do it on their own. That is feeling from trauma number 7, not feeling good enough. Or even people, there's a lot of actors that have what we call imposter syndrome. They really do well, and then they start sabotaging themselves or their career. They might be partying too much or drinking too much or saying, why am I winning these awards? I'm just someone that wanted to do anything, why me versus everybody else? And they struggle with their own success levels. So those are just a few examples of how this can show up in career.
Gotcha. And then like when people are typically showing that, like, so I guess take me through the coaching process, right? Of somebody realizes, first of all, how do they even find out about you? Through this or
They
through?
hear me on podcasts. I do a lot of summits where I'm one of 20 or 30 experts speaking on a particular topic. And I do men's summits, women's summit, parenting summit. I just did one for an HR firm, a summit, speaking to employers. So I'm
Sure.
all over the place because this just shows up all over. So somebody hears me and then they hire me out for a live or virtual speech or a summit. And that's how they hear about it. And then they recognize in themselves that they need some help,
Sure.
so yeah.
I gotcha.
And that's how they first hear about me. And like I said, I primarily have women, but I do have a lot of men that have unfortunately been at the hands of a sociopathic woman. And, they lost a lot of money or they took advantage of them, or it might've been one of the foreign brides came in, got married for status and then took them for all they had and left, so there's a lot of scenarios that are showing up and we call that, the love trauma piece.
Sure.
But that's how they hear about me.
So very interesting. And then when they say, hey, I want to start working with you, what does that typical process look like?
Yeah, the first process is I'd really like to do a deep assessment as far as what level of service they would need. So that's called a life and love transformation discovery session and assessment. So I have them do 4 of my assessments, the Q&A sheet, and I spend an hour and we dive deep into the 10 traumas, which ones show up for them, at what level, how that's showing up currently in their life today. And then I'll give them a little challenge to work on within the week, and then we meet up again. And I said, well, how'd that work out for you? I recently given that to someone who talked a lot about their illnesses. I'm not feeling good, And I said, you've said that a lot during this hour. Do you speak about that a lot around your family and your children? She goes, yeah, but I think I'm pretty positive about it. I said, I just want you to have conscious awareness around that for the next 5 days. And then I want to meet with you again and tell me what you think. And she goes, well, I'm going to complain again. And then my daughter says, how are you feeling? And she said, well, I'm feeling, I could answer a different way, but I'm choosing to be positive. So I gave her a positive answer. And I said, that really wasn't a positive answer. I said, kids are brilliant. I've worked with kids from kindergarten through college. They know that saying, well, mom's really not feeling well, but I'm just going to choose to say a positive answer.
Means something negative, yeah.
She goes, yeah, you're right. I guess that did come off to her as negative. I said, so you're building in your child this anxiety, always asking, is mom okay? She needs to feel security that her parents are okay and going to be around. So this was an unconscious behavioral pattern that she got from her mom, always worried about her mom. So it's very interesting how it can go through the generations. So That's one pattern that we would be working on to stop for her. So these come out in a discovery session. And then I say again, what level of service. I have anything from 3 months work with me to 6 months, which is called the diamond level. The diamond level does have text access, full email access to me. So my VIP is a very high level of service.
Hmm.
I can only take a few people at a time.
Sure.
And that way they're getting, top-notch service. And then there's a 150-page notebook for the diamond level. And they fill out the notebook as they go along, give me the answers, and how they answer them is how I know to coach them. So it's
Gotcha.
very personalized and very interactive. So I describe it like a rainbow. They start at not knowing what they don't know, which is a very frustrating place to be because I don't know why he did what he did when we had such great love. Like, why would he do this? And he goes, I have no idea. I love you and I ruined everything. And I
Sure.
always ruin everything in my life. That was his answer. And I said, well, I'm going to figure it out. And that's what started me on my journey. So not knowing what you know, not knowing. And then it's going up the rainbow with education. So you do better, but then you'll slip. And then you do better, and then you'll slip. But eventually you get to that other side, which is full conscious awareness and a positive mindset for success in all life areas. Plus the skills you need to be a good partner in a relationship. If somebody wants to talk to me about beginning their career, we do career coaching. If they want to be a better parent, we do parenting skills, whatever it is they want to work on. If they want to meet and have better friends, work on that. So that's the other side of it, where there is that pot of gold of feeling amazing about yourself and your life. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. I like it.
It's very good. It's amazing. That's why I love what I do, because everybody's their own puzzle,
Hmm.
their own story. But there's some solid techniques over 6 months that we do. Some people need some don't need others. It really depends what they're presenting to me.
Sure.
And then that's how I would guide them.
Now, with this, is there like a common theme or like a geographic theme that you see? So, for example, maybe in New York, people are experiencing something different than people in Florida or, the West Coast and things like
Yeah.
that. Is there like segregation like that?
Well, I am only limited by the fact that I speak English. So
Sure.
I work with people who are English speaking all over the world. For example, I have a lot of people in Canada,
Hmm.
California, Oregon, the West Coast area, some in New York, but all over the States. People in Australia are clients. I've had people out of London and Paris, someone from Greece. I think one of my most interesting stories was a girl from Lebanon who grew up with severe 10 trauma in community and family trauma. She grew up in the war. And she says,
Oh,
when we went to bed, we didn't know if we were waking up alive every day because we'd hear bombs going off all night long.
oh my God.
So talk about high anxiety. And then her father wasn't in the picture much since she was a little girl. She idolized him. And then he died when she was young. Like he started coming back a little bit more when she was a teenager, and then he was killed.
Hmm.
So now we have abandonment issues of the father plus an early death, both a fault and a fault abandonment. So whenever she met a man, she held on very tight and really wanted love. And she wanted the man to be perfect and love her perfectly. And if he didn't, she'd be disappointed and then upset, So there was a lot of trauma around this fear of security
Hmm.
and the abandonment piece.
Sure.
So, yeah, so
Now, when
that
you
was
work
an
with somebody
interesting
like that, are
case.
you like readjusting their expectations or,
Yes.
walking them through
Yeah.
things?
What is reality and what are too high of expectations? She also had what we call false negative assumptions,
Hmm.
where she assumed they're doing something wrong and blamed them before she even knew why they were late.
Sure.
I think he's out with talking to another girl. Well, that's a false negative assumption. Why do
Sure.
you find out what went on? Oh, I'm sorry, that meeting I had went overboard and he's calling, I'm just leaving the office now. blah, 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 blah. So she realized that she assumed the worst, you know. So this
Yeah.
is the negative mindset, a fear-based mindset. Most of my clients have fear, negative-based mindsets. So they always go to what's wrong with my life or what's negative in my partner versus what's great in my life. And I'm so grateful for my partner, you know, and
Sure.
what's going well in my life. So that's part of that transformation that we really work on, that mindset. So important.
And then when you're doing stuff like this, um, readjusting and stuff like that, like what do you consider success for these individuals? Like what does success look
Um,
like?
yeah, I
Because
have several videos on my YouTube channel with my clients talking about how their life totally changed. And I'll give you a story of a younger girl named Amy. And she was 18 when I started working with her, going from high school into college. And her story is public, so she wouldn't mind me sharing her story. She wasn't sure where she wanted to go, you know, into college. She was in community college. She didn't know what she wanted to study. She was a host at a fast food restaurant.
hmm
She was dating someone 16 years older than her who was the dishwasher. And her mom was scared to death she's going to go nowhere fast, especially if, you know, a baby would have happened out of the result of this dating relationship. And she was very bright. She was a
hmm
very nice girl, bright girl, but there were some things going on in her life. And one of them was abandonment from her father. Second, she was a girl who was adopted. She was an only child.
Sure.
So, in the first couple of years of her life, she had her biological mother was drug addicted. So there, in her very early bonding years as a baby, there was not much bonding or security there.
hmm
Then when she was adopted from these parents who were really nice people, and as the marriage went on, unfortunately, the father had an affair, left the family. So here's another abandonment for her.
hmm
Now things started escalating and she started getting angry, and she and her mom didn't know why, but I knew within the first hour of meeting her. Her mom had met somebody new and
hmm
was very happy, and consciously she was happy for her mom. She met someone, but she didn't like the guy, and she was mad at her mom and having a lot of fights with mom.
hmm
Unconsciously, what was happening was she was losing the only piece of security she knew, her mom, to somebody else.
hmm
So she saw the other woman pull the father away. She was afraid this man would pull her mother away. And she's in this other transition of in college, not knowing what she wants to do. So there was a lot of changes right there, and it all escalated at once.
Sure.
So so she came to me with high anxiety, not sure she wanted to work with a Skype counselor or a coach, I should say. I'm not counseling anymore. Um, and she said, you know what? I'll give it a try for my mom. What's the worst that can happen? I'll learn something. And she says
hmm
that right on the YouTube interview. And then later she says, you know, Riana, you totally changed my life.
Sure.
We got her keyed in on what she would love. She decided she wanted to be an interior design architect. So I said to the mom, I want her to quit that job. So we had her quit her job. So her grades went up the term that I got her, which was fall term. I said, by Christmas, we'll know what you want to do. And you're going to go out and get a job right before the holidays when they're really hiring. So when we knew it was going to be home design, I said, what's the best home store you know that you would love to work in? She goes, oh my God, there's one I love to go in and look, it's a high-end decor store. I said, you're going to get a job there. She goes, they will hire me. It's like, oh yes, they will. So interestingly enough, she did get the job. She loved it. A couple came to her that was on one of the TV shows for flipping houses, which she wanted to do. She says, can I come by and maybe look around and intern for you and help you out? She got that.
hmm
She knows what university she's going to. She got in there and she just said, I'm so excited about my life and where it's going. And she recently met someone at school who's also going to the same university next year, who's in engineering. So her whole life just totally changed within 6 months.
Sure.
And, you know, that's a great story. And like I said, everyone comes to me with a different situation and they don't always know why their moods are so crazy and all over the place. They don't
Sure.
really understand it. So it's when I really do the dissection of the traumas and the levels and their stories
hmm
that I understand where it's all coming from. And then we
Gotcha.
work on changing it together. Yeah, it's
Gotcha.
awesome.
That is awesome. It really does sound awesome because I guess a lot of people they go through periods of their life when things are uncertain, and myself included. The nice part is I have a very survivalist mentality where when bad things happen, people think the worst immediately, and it's funny
Yeah.
because I when stuff like that happens to me, I'm like, well, I'm not gonna die. If I lose an account at my company, I'm like, well, I'm not gonna die. It's money. It'll come back around, or I'll find more of it, or
Yes.
whatever it is. So there's always these different things, but some people they just freak out about it, and then it's just getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Um,
Yeah, well, that's security piece and being afraid to risk. Usually comes from lower confidence, lower self-esteem. Maybe seeing success comes easier for some people than themselves. Life is full of challenges. So it's really important that we do get comfortable with taking a smart and calculated risk and then
sure.
enjoying the journey as we're working through that. And I
Hmm.
always say, well, what's your plan B? If this one doesn't work, what's your backup plan? And then what's your backup plan from that? So, you're always, if you're not growing, you're dying. That's a quote from Tony
Innovate
Robbins
or
that I
die.
love. Yes. So, you want to keep growing and challenging yourself. It's those people that stay in that typical 9 to 5 job that are dying of boredom because
Hmm.
they're not doing anything they can perceive as fun or challenging in life. So it's the ability to be able to take on risks and challenges and feel confident about it. And even if there's what some people would call a failure, we just call it a lesson learned.
Hmm.
Okay, this came up for us. How should we look at it differently? It's not working. Does this mean, the universe is saying I'm going down the wrong path? And if so, what new path can I choose? And we
Hmm.
don't beat ourselves up for it. It's just, okay, new direction. Let's
Sure.
figure out something else I would enjoy. So it's really nothing shakes you too much unless you're maybe in harm's way,
Sure.
as you said, is death looking at you in the face, and that would be scary for anybody, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree 100%. It's just funny because so many people just think the absolute worst in so many different things, and most of the time, you know, chances are pretty good you're waking up tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
if today's a crummy day, go home and, uh, stop doing whatever you're doing and go do something else and take the rest of the day off because, not even some, yes, mental health, but two, at that point, especially if you're an employee for somebody, you're not helping the company in any way. Go home,
Yeah.
relax, rejuvenate, reset your mind. I love meditation. I tell everybody, if you're not meditating,
Yep.
if you're stressed, you need to meditate regularly. If you're not
Yeah.
stressed, it could happen less frequently, in my opinion.
Yeah, all my clients meditate every day for 15 minutes. We do something called divine spiritual meditation, and there's 4 steps to it. Very important for them. It brings in gratitude for what they do have. So they're starting each day recognizing that.
Oh, that's good.
When I have November, I call it Gratitude Month, and this is Gratitude Week with Thanksgiving. But for me, Gratitude Month begins with the veterans and our civil servants on Veterans Day. That for
Hmm.
me starts Gratitude Month to the end of November because
Sure.
I come from a military family. My dad was a colonel in the Air Force, and my nieces and nephew all served. So it's just stopping and pausing and saying, plus, I'm a world traveler, Harrison. So I've been in a lot of countries that don't have freedoms. So even coming home and saying, I'm so grateful for my Western toilet, where in Indonesia, they sure didn't have many of those. That was like a rare
Yep.
commodity to find that. So just being thankful for the little things. My daughter puts in water wells, and in Tanzania, they didn't have running water. They had to work 5 miles for a bucket of dirty water to use throughout their day. So when you're affiliated with things like this, you have a lot of gratitude about the everyday things.
Sure.
And I think that's really important to start your day that way.
Yeah, people don't realize how good they have it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's wild. Now, Now, what happens if a relationship is too good, or I'll use the air quotes of perfect, right? Why do things turn toxic? Once they get more serious, or it's just been happening longer.
Well, that's that time frame from the research, like 4 months into 9 months to a year, when things start getting more serious. So these are when you hear people say, "I found the perfect partner."
Hmm.
Women's like, "I've got a guy that texts me all the time. He emails me, he brings me gifts. He's really like love bombing her, is what we call that." And sometimes that can be a red flag if it's too much too soon. Like in the Dirty John story, she goes, "Wow, he loves me so much, he wants to marry me within 3 months." It's like, no, watch out,
Sure.
that,
Yeah.
be careful. And again, they can do everything perfect up front, but they're kind of really working on being that perfect person.
Hmm.
And then humanness sets in. Now, every relationship will have issues, but unfortunately, they didn't teach us in school or in college, how to communicate in a healthy, conscious way. If they would have taught us humans how to be more consciously aware and talk with more negotiation, what's best for the team. The couple is a team. What's
Sure.
best for the couple, not me, me, me. I want this, I want that. That selfishness that tends to override a lot of relationships. And when two people don't get their own way and nobody's willing to compromise or sacrifice for the good of the team, it can
Hmm.
often fall apart, right?
Sure.
So, and then with the regular, some toxic behaviors set in, that weren't showing up in the very beginning because everyone's on their best behavior the first 90 days. We call it the 90-day rule. Then, you have to take your time with the relationships, grow it slowly. Some of the biggest mistakes for women is getting intimate too early. And men are expecting this today. Why? Because women are doing it. Why? Because they have low self-esteem and think, if I get sexual, then I'll win this man. And
Gotcha.
very often they get sexual, the man leaves, thanks, next. So there's so much to educate both women and men on. And even my men that want a quality relationship, I work with men looking for wives that'll be a great partner and a great mom for their kids. These are men that want marriage and children. And I said, well, don't get intimate so soon. Give it time, nurture the friendship, ask a lot of questions. Part of my coaching is asking, letting them know the very empowering questions they have to ask while they're out on the first few dates to find out if this person is right for them or not.
Can you tell me some of those questions?
Finding out if there's emotional trauma that has not been healed. I mean, most people go out on a date, they drink, they just go and have fun. They don't think twice about what they're doing. That's the normal date. We
Sure.
date, we call it conscious dating. In other
Sure.
words, our people are consciously aware of what's going on while they're dating. I mean, one example would be a simple question: tell me about your mom and dad. It's
Hmm.
a pretty simple question, right?
Sure.
So my people know what to listen for. Here's an example. I had an older woman out meeting an older guy from a dating app. She said he was very handsome, seemed charming, helped her with her chair. Would you like something to eat? Did all the right moves. He asked the first question. He goes, well, I kind of struggled with my dad most of my life. He was an alcoholic. And, what? So she asked, well, was he a good alcoholic? Was he fun? Or, was he a mean guy when he drank? She goes, he was pretty much the mean type. A lot of yelling and screaming, sometimes hitting me. Now, how many traumas have come up in the first few sentences? 3,
Sure.
right? Okay, so then he goes on, but he finally quit when I was a teenager, and he seemed to have a lot of remorse, and he stopped drinking, and we kind of healed that as he got older. And she said, well, that's really good. He goes, my mom, she's a different story. She's in an old age home. If I didn't have to visit her, I never would.
Mm.
She was a drinker too, never really stopped, critical, always put me down. So now you've got how many unhealed traumas?
Sure.
And what I would define in my Love Beyond Your Dreams book, I go into 14 different personality types that can break your heart. And she recognized, aha, he's a mother hater. Someone that hates his mom will never respect his woman.
Mm.
So, she asked a few of the other questions. but she knew right after that one, like she had anxiety in her gut. And when you heal ongoing anxiety comes up on a rare occasion. It's a sign saying you're not in a right place right now.
Sure.
So she knew this guy was not going to be someone she wanted to date. Even though she was handsome, our people know who cares about looks. That's the icing on the cake. We
Sure.
care about who are they as a person? Who are they on the inside? We want the cake, the substance. So she just knew there was a lot of unhealed anger there, and
Mm-hmm.
she didn't want to deal with it. So after the day, she said thank you, went home, and then she called and she said, it was really nice meeting you, but I don't think we're quite a match, and I really would like on the search. Then he starts yelling at her. She goes, there it was, and she
Sure.
goes, thank you. Obviously, you're upset, and I don't, this conversation needs to continue. And she hangs up on him, which I would have instructed her to do. And that was it. And she blocks his number. So, I mean, what she suspected became clearly evident. So a female rejected him, right?
So
And
now
he
what
gets
would have
angry.
happened if she rejected him and nothing happened? He was just like, okay, sounds great. See you later. Would that
She still felt, no, she still felt
gotcha.
that her intuition was, this one's not for me. And
Gotcha.
dating's a numbers game. You have to date a lot of people to find the match that you want. And it's not only analyzing, are they emotionally healthy? It's, do you have the same vision for the future? If one is a skier and one loves the palm trees of Florida, that's probably not going to be a very good match. One wants to retire in Colorado, one wants to retire in Florida. So do the same vision for your future. When I work with my younger women, she might be someone that says, I definitely want marriage and children. So one of her first questions are, are you a man that sees yourself wanting to be married one day and have kids? And if he answers, well, yeah, I'll probably marry kids. I'm not sure. I guess if she really wants some, I'll have them. That's a no answer.
Sure.
And my girls that really want kids would not continue dating that guy.
Gotcha.
Because you can't convince a guy who really is like uncertain about kids. Yet I have men that I've coached that says, I definitely see myself as a dad. And the men that my daughters married said that answer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I definitely want kids. I couldn't picture my life without being a dad. That's the
Sure.
answer you want. You
Sure.
see, so you have to know what you want, your requirements in your life. And usually there's 6 to 8 of them that you're asking questions around your requirements. And requirements can be silly. Like I had a gay male that I coached, and he's there. Well, if this partner does not love dogs or my kids, there's no way we'd work out. I don't care how hot he is. I'm like, okay, perfect. That's one of your requirements.
Sure.
So it can be silly. Must love dogs.
Yeah,
Mine
but
is
that's
must love
that's
dancing.
important.
It's important.
Yeah.
Activities, if you're someone that loves boating and your person always is getting seasick, then that's not going to be a good match for you. I love music and dancing. I was a competitive disco dancer in my young days and still love dance. If I had a guy that just sat there like a lug and didn't like to get up and dance, that would not be the one for me.
I'm a lug. I'm a lug, not a dancer.
No, but even if a guy says, well, I'm willing to learn and he's 60, and I'm like, well, he hasn't learned his entire life. And usually they'll appease a woman for a couple of dance classes, but it's not something they really love themselves.
Sure.
So you want to make sure, you have enough fun in
but
your
you also have to
life, and
see,
you're
you also have to make sure
for
that that's important for you, though.
It is. Yeah. What's important for you?
Yeah, because some people might be like, hey, at least I can imagine some people are like, yeah, it'd be nice if they like dogs, but if they don't care for dogs, it's not a make or break.
If they don't want the dogs around in the world travelers, then
Yes.
that's going to be a problem in their
Sure.
relationship,
Sure.
right? Well, I don't want to put the dogs with someone. I don't really want to go away for a week to 10 days to the Mediterranean. So like for me, I'm a world traveler. My guy has got to like being a world traveler,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead of being, well, I just want to go camping up in the mountains. That would be the one for me. So it comes down to knowing your requirements, what you love in your life, having that life already for yourself, and picking that partner who is a match for you.
Do you also coach people or kind of set realistic expectations as far as like saying, hey, there's the requirements and then there's the positives but not mandatories?
Yes. Yes, the requirements are one thing, they're non-negotiables.
Hmm.
Like a non-negotiable for me would be, must not have an addiction. I
Hmm.
want someone that has an addiction issue. I've worked with people with addictions. I don't want a partner that has an addiction.
Sure.
Um, right. So that's a non-negotiable. The desires or their wants could be, I don't know, a woman that says, I prefer my man has her, but she meets a guy that has everything else and he's bald. She might say, who cares about that? I love everything else about him.
Sure.
Right. So some men
Are you
like
picking? Are you
blondes
picking
and
on
he
me?
might,
You picking on
no,
me because I'm bald?
it's just an example of a lot of women in my age category. They
Sure.
have these must haves. And I say, like, really, is that important if this perfect guy in every way else, again, you're going after the icing, the cake is there,
Hmm.
you know?
So look, some
And,
people are gonna
it's
want their
like,
cake and eat it too. Yeah,
yeah,
they want the whole
you
thing.
know, it might be the guy that wants the blonde, but happens to find everything perfect in the brunette. Like, can he settle? And I don't want to use the word settle, it's the wrong word. Can he see that the other girl is just as beautiful? Right.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's around expectations.
I gotcha. So, what does an emotionally healthy person look like? What does their relationships look like, and all that kind of stuff?
Well, an emotionally healthy person is someone that is more peaceful, very happy in their life. Their life areas are settled. They're financially secure. There's not debt. They're not anxious. They're
We
not
must be talking about
depressed. They're
people outside
not,
of New York.
I don't know. Hopefully, there's healthy people in New York as well. I'm sure there are. People that aren't drinking for stress every day.
Sure.
They're able to roll through the punches, look at life in a positive way. The studies show that the happiest relationships are spiritually based. And I'm not talking religion, I'm talking about a sense of spirituality,
Hmm.
which people are. I consider myself spiritual. We are 24/7. That's just part of who we are. We do what's right for ourselves and for others. We have high integrity. We enjoy the little things in life too, right?
Sure.
So we have gratitude about life. So if you're a happy person and content, that's the type of person you're also looking for, someone who's emotionally balanced and happy in all their life areas, good, long-lasting friends, able to talk through their issues. There's never a reason to yell at your partner unless your partner's in harm's way.
Hmm.
If the car's going to hit them, then you say, hey, watch out, then you yell, but never around an issue. You learn to communicate through your issues and have a discussion on what's best for the both of you, the team.
Sure. Now,
Mm-hmm.
in a perfect world, does a perfect relationship, do they just click right away, or do they still even have to work through things?
You always have to work through things because issues will always come up. I think that's really realistic. I do teach my couples that they should have this philosophy of it's you and me against the world.
Hmm.
In other words, putting each other first. And in previous generations, they always put the kids first, the kids' activities, 5 sports, taxi driving them around to everywhere to the point where they stop dating each other. There's no time for the couple. And then what happens when the kids are out of high school, the couple falls apart because they haven't taken that time, quality time for dating and romance for themselves.
Hmm.
And, I had one husband in my office. Well, why do I have to keep dating her? I married her. I said, you still want sex? And he goes, oh, okay. It's like, yeah, get her out of the house, dress nice for her, take her somewhere nice.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be an expensive, fancy dinner. Take a walk on the beach and buy a glass of wine afterwards and have a conversation. Tell her she looks pretty. When a woman's in her house, she finds things she has to cook, clean, or do. And her mind is in it in an intimate way.
Hmm.
Men and women are very different when it comes to their sexual makeup and their desires. Most people don't know the man's sexual center of the brain is 7 times that of a woman. Did you know that, Harrison?
Yes, I did know that.
You did.
I did. I did.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Most don't know that. Okay. And so they're like, yeah, sex, let's do it. And a woman makes love with the brain first. So
Sure.
she needs her 5 senses engaged, taste, touch, sound, be able to relax, not think about her to do, where she's socialize to take care of everyone else and herself last, unfortunately.
Hmm.
So the man getting her out of the household so she can just relax and focus on herself and him and each other is more apt to have a nice intimate evening later than just watching the 11 o'clock news, turning off the TV and saying let's have sex. Well, no, she's not ready, she's not engaged, her senses are, I'm tired now, I want to go to sleep. So, and now that begins to feel like a chore for her. I can hear the
Sure.
ladies applauding out there. It's like, yeah, say that. So get your ladies out and, start treating them special as if you were dating them again and keep the dating going throughout your relationship.
Gotcha.
And, to both the women and the men, keep yourself up. What did you
Hmm.
look like when you met? Of course, you're going to age, but do you still dress nice for your partner? So ladies, do your hair and your makeup. Men, do you, shave and, wear cologne as you did when you first met her? So, I mean, who are you and who are you presenting to your partner?
Hmm.
And so many people get lazy in their relationships and then wonder why there's affairs or it falls apart. So, you have to stay engaged.
Sure.
I also talk about the balanced triangle
Hmm.
of you, me, and us.
Hmm.
So one leg is the man where he has his career and maybe, his exercise, gym or bike riding, and then his time with friends. And she has her exercise, yoga and work and her time. And then there's us. And us is that time that you spend together. Those vacations you take, just the two of you, put the kids with somebody else, those date nights, making sure you invest equal amount of time in the us. And that's usually the leg that usually gets short, or they put the kids in there and then there's
Sure.
no time for us. And I got to say, the millennial men, I'm talking about my two son-in-laws, and I see their friends. The men have really stepped up to be equal parents, and I really commend the men on doing that because most women have careers today and they're out there working. So with both parents working, they have to be equal partners in the household with cooking, cleaning, and the kids. My generation, the 70s, the women had to do it all.
Hmm.
The men did their 9 to 5 job, the women did their 9 to 5 job, then the women's cooked, then the women bathed the kids and got them to bed, did everything, the grocery shopping, everything. And then the men's like, okay, you want sex now? No, I'm exhausted. They've been working a 15-hour day.
Sure.
When the men come home, they sit on the couch, watch TV, and their day was completely over. And it's like, okay, serve me my dinner. But that was the 70s. And it's funny, there's a male psychologist, Terry Real, that says, unfortunately, the baby boomer men have not really changed much. But he did say all his studies around the millennial men, they have really, really stepped up. And he believes that's because they watched their mothers suffer so much and see the marriages fall apart,
Sure.
because a woman said, "Oh,
Hmm.
God, this is difficult. I have kids and a big kid, the husband."
Sure.
So that was interesting, his study. And I did see that myself. The millennial men are really pitching in equally with household and parenting work. And that way the couple has more time together as well.
Sure. Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty wild to see the shift. That's for sure. I've been watching Mad Men lately. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Oh, that's a great series, isn't it?
It's
Yeah,
funny
that's
because a
what it
lot of
was
people,
like.
yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard it's a very accurate depiction of what it was like back in the day.
Watching my parents, I saw a lot of that. My father wasn't a drinker, but the even the TV shows that we grew up, like Ozzie and Harriet, the men walk in the door, they get their martinis served by their women in the happy housewife dress, you know, and
Sure.
they felt as long as they were giving them the house in the suburbs, they should be happy, even if they
Hmm.
didn't come home at night, or they had girlfriends, the wives were just supposed to deal with it and raise the kids in the suburban house. That's very much the way it was in my parents' generation. And
Sure.
then by the time I got to be 20 and going off to Penn State for broadcasting, that was my major. We were expected to do it all. Now the woman has to do it all, and the
Hmm.
men still held male privilege. So those didn't create very happy marriages either. Yeah.
Gotcha. Jesus.
Interesting. Yeah.
Very.
Mad Men is very interesting.
it's an incredible flashback to the history. And you know that it's obviously not the most accurate TV show in the world, but it's still a great depiction of what it was back in the day.
Yes, for
um
sure.
and they do a really good job at replicating a lot of things from the 70s, everything from the cars, the clothing, and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, they did great.
I have a lot of kudos to them for that. But um you know, when so I guess my next question is when some, let's just say that like spark dies amongst people, what is the next steps that they should do or they can do themselves to help it get back on track?
Well, they have to have an open mind to keeping sparks going. You know, I always say Halloween's one of the best occasions for couples to go out and have fun. You know,
Sure.
go put on costumes and role play. Go do something spicy. Go to Fantasy Fest in Key West. You know, there's plenty of
What is
things you can
Fantasy
do.
Fest?
It's a full week of Halloween parties.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's really a great time for adults. You know, go start traveling the world and make love in beautiful places. You know, don't allow your lives to become stale.
Hmm.
Create different things. You know, if camping's your thing, go take a weekend and do a romantic camping trip somewhere. You know, you can always do something, you know, pick up a hobby you can do together, you know.
Fair
So
enough.
always trying to get fresh and changing and
Sure.
growing.
Now, do you think that people change over time and it is appropriate for people to move in and out of long-term relationships, or do you think that it should just be set, hey, this is the one way we're doing it and that's it?
Well, I just love my brother and sister-in-law that have been married 36 years, you know, and they have a beautiful relationship. And, you know, my brother grew up with the same type of trauma as I did, where my father wasn't in the home. And he and I actually uncovered that he was having an affair when we were very young kids.
Hmm.
So he took it to the point where I will never do this to my wife. And so he had a good out of the bad, and he's been an excellent father and husband.
Hmm.
And they have a very loving and fun relationship, and I adore them. Like my sister-in-law and I are sisters, and you know, I very much admire the man that my brother is.
Hmm.
So they are determined, no matter what, they're staying together. And when you see marriages like that where they are fun, they travel a lot, and then my brother rides motorcycles, so he has what he calls brain flush with the boys for 10 days, and now she takes, you know, their son on a cruise, you know, and they
Sure.
have that time. So yeah, I mean, they keep their life fresh and fun and exciting together, and then they have their separate time. But you know, there's a very high love and respect for each other, for sure.
I gotcha.
So it really depends. I mean, I ideally that's the best for the children, of course, to keep the marriage together. But the studies also show if the relationship is struggling, it's worse to stay in a toxic marriage over time. Worse for everyone.
Hmm.
It's better to divorce and have, you know, one emotionally healthy partner. If the other one is not healthy, at least the kids have one stable parent that they can, you know, count on,
Sure.
and who's got them and, you know, raises them in the right way, you know. So yeah,
Interesting. Interesting. What else do you
don't
got for me?
stay long-term relationship if it's toxic, for sure. You know,
Sure.
you don't want to do
Are
that.
there telltale signs to get out immediately? Hit that eject button, or
Any kind of emotional abuse, verbal put downs, control, jealousy, demanding, making you feel less than, yelling, screaming, passive aggressiveness where they shut down and don't talk to you, punish you with quietness. And remember, your kids are witnessing all of this. So
sure.
not only you going through the toxic relationships, so are your kids. So I always say it's best to get out early versus later and have your kids suffering. And this is the same if this is their father, or you bring a toxic boyfriend into the house,
Sure.
ladies. So, I mean, if that guy's toxic, get rid of him. You know, the world's abundant. There's always somebody new to love, but you know, you have to really be careful that you are not modeling that this is what love looks like to your children.
Sure.
And you know what happens to a lot of relationships, the toxic one becomes so toxic that it invokes so much anger in the emotionally healthy one, because he's looking for an argument, and then the emotionally healthy one gets involved in the toxic behaviors. Eventually, the emotionally healthy one usually says, I can't stand it, and leaves.
Hmm.
But I would usually, these relationships don't get better. They usually get worse. On my free love test on my website, rianamilne.com, is one called the red flag warning checklist, where there's 36 signs of an unhealthy relationship. So if you're questioning, is the relationship you're in healthy? Go take that one. It's also there with the childhood trauma checklist, the top 10 that I see, the childhood trauma list that I created. There is a test for singles to see if you're ready to be dating, or if there's more in your life that you need to do to become a successful single first. And the other one is called ACOA. It's a checklist from Sylvia Kay and Ronnie Fisher that they were developed, and I tweaked it a little bit. I took out the headings, but that one is also a telltale sign if you're struggling in life and relationships due to past trauma. So those four are very enlightening, and they are for free, and you'll get a copy of your test once you take them. So that is good for people to check out.
Very cool. I like it. You have a
So,
beautiful website, by the way.
oh, thank you.
You're very welcome.
To be totally remodeled.
Really?
Yes.
Hey, teach his own.
Thank
So,
you.
are there any questions that I haven't asked that you think are super important and we should cover?
I can give you a couple of tips that I give my people. One
Sure.
is called the 5 choices that leads to wise decisions. That one is super important for people that tend to be impulsive. And Harrison, you said that you can be. So here it's use it on one hand. And if you don't get the answers, it's like, stop, it's like, here you go. So the question before you say or act or even write a text is, will this hurt me in any way?
Hmm.
Will it hurt the person I love? Will it hurt my children or my extended family? Will it hurt my reputation on the job or in the community? And is it for the best of all or for the good of all? That's the spiritual question. And if in doubt, go without doing it. Give yourself more time to think through that choice or that decision before you act on it. And my clients who are impulsive need to learn those and kind of live by those to make wiser and more sound decisions that aren't going to hurt anybody.
Sure.
So that's really important. And then I often talk about the 7 Ds for success. And this is my mindset for success that I teach my clients. The 5 Ds is a lesson from my dad. He said, "Hun, if you have the 5 Ds, you can do anything." And I added 2 more, one to the front end and one to the back end of the list. So the first one I added was decide. And I have found that when I make a decision that I'm going to do something, I want to live up to that decision. I
Sure.
want to meet that challenge. So
Hmm.
the first thing is really concretely and make a very solid decision. I'm going to do something. That's number 1. Then the 5 in between is desire, determination, dedication, devotion, which is in a spiritual way, have faith you can do it,
Hmm.
and dare to dream. My dad said, dream big, dare to dream.
I
And
like
then the
it.
last one I added was drive, because, or some people call it the grind, because even though you're doing something you love, sometimes you're involved in a mega project, which I have done, going from a local psychotherapy practice to a global coaching practice. And it took me tons of hours, just building my online school, my Life and Love Training Academy.com, to make a whole automated class takes a lot of time, 12, 14-hour days for 3 months straight. And that's what I would call the grind, the keeping my eye on that decision that I decide I'm going to have online training classes,
Yeah.
which will be good for my people that want that level of service. And so the 7 Ds for success will really help you to get in and complete the project of your dreams. Goal setting is very important. Whenever I do a big project like writing my Love Beyond Your Dreams book, that's over 400 pages. I decided I'm going to write a book on love. There was I was teaching, and I needed to get it in book format. And I was in New Jersey and about to move to Florida. And I said, this must be done before I move, because I don't want to be halfway in a project and then setting up an apartment and setting up a new practice. The book would just be put to the side.
Sure.
So I decided it was going to be done in 6 months from consent to cover. And I was
Wow.
done it, and I set it into the editor, and you have to have 5 test readers and about 18 rounds of editing. And I was moving to Florida. I was like, oh, darn, the book did not get to me before I moved. And don't I show up at my new townhome in Florida, and against the door is the book. So I just picked it up and I danced around. It's like, I did it.
Oh my
I
God, that's
got the book
incredible.
before I walked in the door of Florida, so
That's
there was
crazy.
my sample book. And I reached my goal, and that was really, really cool. So those are the successes you remember in life when you decide you're going to do something, set the goal, reach it. It really builds your confidence, your self-esteem, your ability to take on more projects. But the mindset for success is a belief system, and meditation is definitely based in science. There's a thing, is meditation, what do you do? Just sit and breathe. Why is that so important? Well, the science shows it definitely increases the dopamine and serotonin levels of your brain, which are your happy chemicals. And
Sure.
at the same time, reduces anxiety, depression, cortisol level, which is your flight or fight, and your blood pressure. So, moves the bad stuff from your brain and body cells. It increases the good stuff. And
Sure.
all you need is 15 minutes a day.
I
And that
agree.
is proven in science.
I agree.
So, definitely what you think about will come about. And when you have the mindset for success, you can reach all kinds of goals and dreams. So that's why I teach it. I see amazing transformations from my clients.
I love it. I love it. So, as we're wrapping this thing up, tell people, sum it up if you want, and tell people how they can find you and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. I just want to say to everyone, now's the time with the new year coming and the holidays, to really not wait to create that life that you desire and to have the love you deserve. So reach out to me if you're struggling in any way at my website, rianamilne.com. Sign up for the Life and Love Transformation Discovery Session. Take the 4 free love tests, download the free book chapters. And while you're at it, listen to my podcast, Lessons in Life and Love, and download the free app. It's Lessons in Life and Love on the go. And you can see my YouTube channel there and my podcast. Also, I have that free ebook. It's at havetheloveyoudeserve.com.
Hmm.
And that ebook goes deeper into the childhood trauma situation. It will explain to you a little bit deeper about that concept. So that's, again, havetheloveyoudeserve.com.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing all that. I appreciate it. I got quite a good lesson in this.
Good, Harrison. I'm glad to hear you learned something new. But you knew about the 7 sex centers of the brain. That was pretty good.
Most people
Most
don't
don't
realize I
know
might be
that.
smarter than I look sometimes. Not always,
Good for you.
sometimes. So, thank you so
Good
much
for
for coming
you.
to hang out with me. You'll
I
have to come
really
back on
enjoyed
again.
it.
I'm looking forward to it again. And hopefully next time
Sure,
we do this, it'll be
definitely.
in person. I'll be down in Florida soon.
Oh, very cool. That would be great.
So,
Give me
alrighty.
a buzz. You know
I
where to get
absolutely
me.
will. I absolutely will.
All right.
Rihanna, thank you so much for hanging out and enjoy the. I don't know if it's nice in Florida, but today it
It
happens to be quite
is.
nice on Long Island. So I'm going to go enjoy some of
Good.
the weather.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're
Have a
very
beautiful
welcome.
day.
Thanks for hanging out.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.